Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajahat Ali for the Left Hook Substack. Even though I'm supposed to be on vacation here in Orlando with my in-laws, as you can clearly see, there's no vacation, only a tired middle-aged dad who was forced to go to Disney World yesterday and return home at 1 a.m. And then we were supposed to do this on Substack Live, but Peter Beinart, just the world's greatest disappointment. I mean, this man, this is the
So many
second,
people.
literally the second strike. I said, just open up your app. He's
Hey,
like,
I don't
me
think we can
no,
say second strike at this moment. It's
me
a little
no
too close.
understand iPhone. And I'm like, Peter, what would the Jews in Israel say? These Jewish entrepreneurs, these tech mavens in Israel, and here you are, the diaspora Jew, just failing miserably. What do you say to your people?
I mean, no, I mean they can literally they can hack into the Ayatollah Khamenei's phone and basically the AI program it so he's speaking in Yiddish, and I can't even hack into my own phone,
He
right?
literally cannot open his iPhone and figure
I
out a
can't even
Substack app.
open I iPhone. This is why, I mean, really, this was why, frankly, Zionism was created to deal with people like me. Unfortunately, it's had some negative consequences
Yeah,
as well.
some negative consequence. And the reason why I wanted to talk to Peter is we were still in the following the shockwaves and aftermath of Zohran Mamdani's historic win in the Democratic mayoral primary. And I wanted to ask the big question is how Mamdani's win actually represents the majority's shift when it comes to Israel and the growing divides within American Jewish communities. And I think this is very important. I'm so glad Peter is here. Peter has a fantastic Substack that you should all follow. Also, is the co-editor of Jewish Currents,
Editor at large, yeah,
editor at large of
editor
Jewish
at large.
Currents, and author of a book. What was the latest book that just came out?
Being Jewish after the destruction of Gaza.
And Peter, like me, gets a lot of hate from his own communities, but he's been talking about, hey, folks, hey, some
Right,
Jews who are trying to pit this as a Muslim versus
right,
Jew, some Jews who are saying, it's anti-Semitism, some
right,
Jews who are trying to just traffic in the worst Islamophobic
right,
smearing and rhetoric
right,
that we've seen since 9/11. Folks,
right,
literally, they're putting photos of the 9/11 terror attacks on the two towers next to Zoran Mamdani's name.
right.
Not subtle at all. And as we're recording this just half hour ago, Bill Ackman, modern supervillain, is openly, literally openly on Twitter, like Lex Luthor, sharing his supervillain plan, talk about I'm in a WhatsApp group with all these billionaires and we could raise hundreds of millions of
Right.
dollars
Because
if
that won't promote anti-Semitism or
yeah,
anything.
within 20 minutes to destroy Mamdani. I'm not making this up. But Peter, in the last couple of days has really actually used the data and the facts to break down what American Jews really think.
Right,
Not just American Jews about Mamdani, but also what Americans are saying
right,
about Mamdani's views on
right,
Palestine and Israel. Because before we get into it, what's been remarkable, and I've been saying this as a Muslim, what's common to us isn't common to everyone. When you see the double standards, what Mamdani has to go through, even now, the
mhm,
questions, the
yes,
grilling, the gauntlet, no one else has to, right? Barack
right,
Obama went through it, Kamala Harris went through it. I, as a Muslim, as a brown man since 9/11, have had to apologize for violent actions done by violent people I've never met. And yet, Vance Bolter, the white Christian nationalist, Trump supporting Republican, had a hit list of 70 people killed an elected official completely out of the news. Not even Republicans are asked about it. And Zoran Mamdani, even on Stephen Colbert's show, is
yeah.
asked these asinine questions about Israel and Intifada and whatnot. And here we are, where you said something on Twitter, which I mean, I want to unpack that first on
Yeah.
a macro level. You said Mamdani's win, and I'm paraphrasing, shows you that the Biden position in Israel is no longer tenable for Democrats if they want to win moving forward. Can you unpack that in relation to what happened with Mamdani?
Yeah, I mean, the polling on in the polling on Israel is moving really fast. And
Mm,
I don't think often in the media is the media is behind where the public I have not even I'm not sure I've seen any issue other than gay marriage on which I've seen public shift this dramatic.
in
So
our lifetime, you're right. That's
10
within
years
4 years.
ago, I
Yep.
don't have the numbers exactly, but 10 years ago, Democrats were more favorable to Israel than the Palestinians by somewhere like 35 points.
Wow.
Now it's completely flipped. They're more sympathetic to Palestinians by roughly 35 points. And what's amazing is that it's not just young Democrats. The age gap, a generation gap among Democrats is closed. So basically, older Democrats are now basically just as unfavorable, and it's about 70% unfavorability for Israel.
Wow.
And for Republican opinion is also shifting very much. I mean, you see it in some of these MAGA influencers, especially among young Republicans. So 50% of Republicans under the age of 50 have an unfavorable view of Israel. The cohort that is still pro-Israel is older Republicans. But so you're talking about a Democratic Party primary, right? In which the public, if you're taking up basically unconditional support of Israel line, yes, there are advantages in terms of relationships with donors, and the media may not give you a hard time, but it's really out of step with most Democrats, with most where most Democrats are. Even back in 2020, you could see with Sanders and even with Elizabeth Warren, even with Pete Buttigieg, they were edging away from this. The Democrats nominated Biden, who alongside Bloomberg were the ones who were still most wedded. Not surprisingly, the also older and more moderate. But I think there probably will be some Democrats who try to hew to this kind of Cuomo AIPAC Biden line. But I frankly think it's going to be a big vulnerability for them. And if there are any Democrats who are progressive, who integrate this in a progressive agenda, not like make it the center, of course, but like Mamdani did, make bread and butter issues the center and say, I believe in equality and justice and decency for everybody. And so that also means I believe in it for Palestinians. And I think Israel should be treated like all other countries
Yep.
in the way we think about our relationship with them. I think that's going to be a very powerful selling point. People are hungry for it.
And I think you just touched upon it. The through line is that consistency on the
Yes.
messaging, right?
Yes.
We want a safety and security for everyone,
Absolutely.
including Palestinians and Israelis and Ukrainians and undocumented immigrants. And each and every single time Zoran was pressed on it, he pivoted back to that talking point. He did not waver.
Absolutely. I think that was what was so smart about it. And this is what politicians need to learn. People have all of these catchphrases which are designed to get you into traps. Right to exist, intifada this, violent, the river to the sea. Just come back to the basic principle, right? I believe that states should treat everyone equally under the law, irrespective of their religion or their ethnicity and race. That's what I'm fighting for in America. That's what I believe in every place in the world, including for Israelis and Palestinians. How can a decent person oppose that, right? And all of these, but if you bring it back to that, then in some ways you're putting them in the box, because the truth is that they do oppose that. The
Yeah.
fundamental position is they actually do oppose it, but it's hard to say that outright, which is why there's this whole other language that they try to draw you into.
And I know, as you and I have been thrust in these situations, these debates, bad faith debates, is once you get them on occupation and talk about occupation in the West Bank settlements, there's no defense, which is why they always try to pivot to river to the sea and global intifada and this and
Right,
that, but they
right,
cannot ever. And I'm talking about all the people I go and debate with, and I'm not even a debater when it comes to Piers Morgan on MSNBC and yada, 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 is they're not able to contend with the fact that they are in support of a genocide in Gaza. They are in support of occupation, and they're in support of an apartheid system, which is what is happening under Israel's occupation of Palestinians. Two different laws for two different people, unequal systems, and they cannot defend the expansion of settlements and the violence against Palestinians, right? And I think what Zoran did was he always asked him the same stupid question. And what really infuriates me, Peter, before I continue, is there is an ongoing genocide. How come the defenders of Israel are
right.
never asked whether
Absolutely.
they condemn Netanyahu's war crimes?
Right. I mean, Andrew Cuomo signed up because I guess he had time on his hands and he needed a hobby. So instead of choosing golf or fishing, he decided it would be fun to be Netanyahu's lawyer at the International Criminal Court, right? This man has been indicted for war crimes, right? You imagine if a mayor for New York said, you know what would maybe be fun? I'm going to go be Slobodan Milosevic's lawyer or the lawyer for the Rwandan genocide heirs, right? And he didn't get 1/100th of as much pressure from on that question from Zohran Mamdani's answer on globalize the intifada, right? Whereas Cuomo is actively defending someone who has been indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes because he has basically starved and slaughtered tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, and I'm glad he didn't shy away from what it actually meant, right? And what it meant is justice, justice for everyone, right? Justice for all people in connecting the struggle of Palestinians to Ukrainians to undocumented immigrants, right? But you see the Democratic establishment, and I have to ask you about this. What we just said, Cuomo, predator, corrupt,
Right,
decides on his free time, you know what? Yeah, let me go defend this war criminal. And at the
right,
last second, because Mamdani ran this fantastic campaign, you saw two things happen. You saw just blatant Islamophobia against
Right.
him, right?
Right.
He's the son of African immigrants. He's South Asian, but there was, the Gujaratis from India, then went to Uganda, then came here to America, right? He has a Muslim dad, Hindu mom. Doesn't matter. A brown man is a Muslim, is a Palestinian, is an Arab, is a terrorist, is responsible for 9/11, right? So you saw the Cuomo campaign
Yeah.
spend millions of dollars with a lot of these funders and backers, let's be honest, who also support AIPAC. Some of them also support Betar, a just completely nutty organization that had an amazing meltdown on Twitter. Just amazing. Telling all New York Jews to evacuate after Mamdani's win. I don't see your luggage, Peter. What's happening? You're supposed to go to Israel.
I know this is what's really, it's really, I mean, one needs to make fun of it, but it's also really upsetting to me because there are, it's symptomatic of a kind of an addiction to a politics of supremacy that makes you believe that someone who speaks in the language of equality is seeking your death or subjugation. There's nothing in anything Zohran Mamdani has said, nothing that would suggest that he doesn't believe that Jewish New Yorkers should be just as equal and just as safe and have just as much dignity as everybody else. And that is exactly what we have the right to expect, right? Just as what Israeli Jews have the right to expect, to be treated equally alongside the people who you live alongside. And if you interpret that as a threat to your safety, it's because you have become consumed by an ideology of supremacism,
Yeah.
which is why Protestants in Northern Ireland saw Catholic equality as also a threat. It's why white South Africans saw that. And it's also upsetting to me because like you are then what you're doing is you're connecting your situation in New York and you're drawing on a certain language of fear and of Jewish safety, which is connected back to other times and periods of times where Jews were radically unsafe because they were being brutally oppressed and massacred and slaughtered and subjects of genocide. And it's a desecration of
Mhm.
that experience, which we should treat with reverence, to basically invoke that kind of history because you're upset that what? Mamdani's going to raise your taxes, that he's not going to lay out the welcome mat for Benjamin Netanyahu when he comes here because he's acquitted of war crimes. It's disgusting to me. It's really upsetting.
And I'm so glad you talked about it because you went there before I did about how the supremacy and how it reminds you not just of the mindset, the aggrieved mindset of those who are privileged in South Africa, but it reminds me of white supremacy in America, right?
Yeah.
A lot of Trump voters, they have cultural anxiety. They're uncomfortable seeing an ethnic name. They're uncomfortable,
Yes. Right.
using a pronoun. They're uncomfortable seeing a person like me and you talk. That
Yes.
causes them discomfort. So their
Right.
discomfort trumps
Yes.
our safety, our security, our civil liberties. And I don't
Right.
think that many of these and
Yes.
people who are saying, let me lean into my Jewish identity and say that Mamdani makes me unsafe and these
Right.
pro-Palestinian students make me feel unsafe and let me just crush them. I don't think they realize how it's playing out globally and nationally.
Yeah, I mean, and the irony is it's a kind of parody of what people accuse the left of doing, right? The claim was that the left basically couldn't distinguish actual harm, physical harm, from basically being made uncomfortable because someone says something you disagree with, right? That was always the claim about that was the woke left, right? That they
That's
wanted
why no
safe
safe
spaces.
spaces.
Right, no safe spaces. Okay, right. So Zohran Mamdani may say some things about Israel that make you uncomfortable because they challenge the notion that you of Israel that you have. Fine. So argue back. Have the conversation, right? It's not threatening your safety, and I think that the to me, Zohran Mamdani, his ascent represents the New York that I believe in, which is the New
Absolutely.
York, the same New York, there was this great line that my old colleague Leon Wieseltier had when people were attacking Barack Obama as not being fully American. Obama's mentor, one of his mentors in Chicago was a Jewish lawyer named Abner Mikva. And Leon said, Barack Hussein Obama is as much an American name as Abner Mikva is an American name, which is that
Great.
once upon a time, Abner Mikva would have also been seen a radically foreign name. Zohran Mamdani is fully American in exactly the same sense that the ancestors of most New York Jews who, when they came here speaking Yiddish, that they were fully American with their names that threatened people and their customs that people couldn't handle because they were different. And we enriched the city, and he is now enriching the city. And that's what makes New York great is this talent that comes in, and then you learn from that. I think it's unbelievable. When I saw those videos of him speaking Hindi and all, I thought like, this is New York to me. This is the beauty of New York. Just like Fiorello LaGuardia spoke Yiddish when he ran in the 1930s. Now Zohran Mamdani is speaking Hindi or Urdu. It's like, it's amazing. This is the city I believe in.
And that's why, it echoes a post that I did that went viral. Similarly, is that's why I love New York, right? A Muslim American candidate for mayor being cross-endorsed by a Jewish American candidate, Brett
Absolutely.
Lander, and a black candidate, Michael Blake, right? Helping defeat a sexual predator. This is so New York. This
Yes.
is America, right? And people are forgetting
Absolutely.
that Zoran could not have done it
Yes.
without Brad Lander, right? And I just feel like that's such a missing piece. Like that's so New York. It's a Muslim and a Jew and a black man teaming up like the Avengers against a sexual predator and a corrupt establishment politician. And somehow that is completely excised from these bad faith actors. They're just excising Brad Lander's existence. Like I think Brad Lander, who openly is Jewish, proudly
Yes.
Jewish, doesn't
Yes.
hide his Jewishness.
Yes.
If indeed Zoran Mamdani, God forbid, was this hate monger, why
Right.
would Brad Lander
Right.
cross endorse him?
Absolutely. Brad Lander, but I know Brad Lander. He's really a mensch. He's really a good man. And he doesn't agree with Mamdani 100% on everything, but when it comes to Israel, but he knows that Mamdani is acting in good faith, that he genuinely believes in these principles. And so Brad Lander could have played a very destructive role, right? He could have said, "Oh, because I disagree with him a little bit on some of these things, I'm going to basically attack him and try to scare people about him." But he knows that Mamdani believes in the same principles that him. He knows that Mamdani is going to make the city. Badlander cares about working class people in New York, right? And he knows that Badlander also understands something that like if people, because they want to maintain unconditional support of Israel, are going to throw in their lot with Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams and just like nasty people who do nasty things,
Laura
it
Loomer, Betar, ADL,
it shows,
AIPAC.
yeah, or Donald Trump. It shows, it's not just shows that you don't care about about Palestinians. It shows that you don't really care about the city and you don't really care about the country, right? That you'd be willing to choose a sexual predator, right? Or a corrupt mayor, because they're willing to sign the bot on the dotted line, about whatever Israel does is fine. Like Brad Lander was much better than that.
And you briefly mentioned this, but what I try to say is like if I was an advisor to the Jews, right, all the Jews, I would say, listen, there are horrific conspiracy theories that have been promoted predominantly by the right wing, such as the replacement theory. That's a right wing Nazi conspiracy theory that Trump and Elise Stefanik and all these people have helped mainstream in the past 8 years, which has radicalized terrorists to commit violence against Jews, against Muslims, against Black people. They believe in the George Soros conspiracy, anti-Semitic. They believe in QAnon, right? These people are not friends of Jews. Openly, Michelle Bachmann, a Christian nationalist, a couple of days ago, is saying that the project is for Jews to control Jerusalem as a necessary precondition for what? The return of Jesus, right? They're just using you as tools. But when you come out and you happen to be a billionaire like Bill Ackman and you're Jewish and you use all the power
Mhm.
of one aspect of the Jewish community and you lean in and call in favors, you literally are promoting the worst stereotype about your peoples.
Right. Yes, I mean, I think that's true, and there's just not a lack of there's not a self-consciousness about this, and I think there's also, part of the problem with this discourse is, and I think the media often bears a lot of blame for this, is they tend to, when they look at people like Bill Ackman or whoever these people are, AIPAC, ADL, they use phrases like Jewish leaders and Jewish community as if these people kind of represent Jews writ large. I mean, the irony is that like one of the jokes that Jews make about ourselves is that basically we can't agree on anything, right?
Was
Like there's
that 10 Jews, 11 opinions?
yeah, there's like the joke about the Jew who he gets lost on a deserted island and they find him a year later and he's built two synagogues and they say, "Why two?" And he says, "This is the one I go to and this is the one I wouldn't set foot in." You
That's
know?
hilarious.
It's like whatever. So like the truth is that I mean, just like Christians, like lots of like Jews are very deeply, especially at this moment, very, very, very deeply divided. So there are a lot of Jews who think Zohran Mamdani, I think wrongly, think of him as a threat and are really worried. There are lots of other Jews, including some of their own children and grandchildren, who are ecstatic. They love Zohran Mamdani. They believe in his message. They feel profoundly alienated from what Israel's doing. They care about Palestinian freedom. And so the question is, you have to. There's a difference in fundamental values among Jews, just as there
Yeah.
is among Christians, among Muslims, anyone else. And you have to ask, what are the fundamental values? Bill Ackman doesn't share the values that you and I and Zohran Mamdani share. He shares out values that are much more like the values of Donald Trump.
And this is why I think it's so important that you said that the media has failed on this, not just in the double standards, not just in the demonization of any pro-Palestine activist voice, but by giving the platform to the people like ADL and AIPAC over what the data clearly shows is a majority of Jews that you mentioned on Twitter who actually, have a much more nuanced and critical relationship with Israel, right? It does a disservice because it amplifies the worst people spreading the worst conspiracy theories that are amplified by the right and also the left, right? There's anti-Semitism across the board, but specifically these conspiracy theories that I mentioned have been amplified by the right wing, and you erase the fact that there were Jewish Americans who were part of the ceasefire movement. There were Jewish American students who were leading this multiracial, multicultural movement on college campuses. And
Yes.
and the polls that you cite in your Twitter the last couple of days, I just want you to break that down. How young Jews in New York are just like a remarkable shift when it comes to their relationship with Israel.
Yes, I mean there was a poll that was done back in 2023, so I think this is again even before this was, I don't even maybe even before the assault on destruction of Gaza, which showed that among Jews under the age of 30 in New York, literally 50% said very strongly disagreed that Israel made them proud to be Jewish, right? And a huge generational gap. Everyone who lives in the Jewish community who's honest about it recognizes that especially among non-Orthodox Jews, there's a huge generational gap on this question. It's a source of tremendous division, right? Just like, many Americans joke that they can't get together over Thanksgiving because they can't talk about Donald Trump. Jews joke they can't get together over Passover Seder because they can't talk about Israel without people screaming at each other. It's a source of tremendous division, and that's because younger people are just not buying the line that's being peddled by AIPAC and ADL and Bill Ackman and even their own parents and rabbis. I encounter it literally every single day. I get emails from people like this. And it's those people who just get erased from the conversation. So it's as if Zohran Mamdani won without getting Jewish votes. That's nonsense. He would not have won if he'd not been able to get
Exactly.
Jewish votes. He got a ton of Jewish votes. He may have come in second, but I strongly would suspect that among younger American Jews, he came in first, right?
Mm.
And that's what the media doesn't tend to focus on because it really completely disrupts the narrative of Bill Ackman and Betar and AIPAC and ADL, which is basically like Mamdani's won. The Jews are basically ferrying, they're starting to row across the river to New Jersey, right? No, they're celebrating in Brooklyn, in many parts of Brooklyn, these young Jews, and I know so many of them who were canvassing their hearts out for
Yeah.
Mamdani.
And again, going back to Brad Lander, right? And I think that's why I always try to remind people that, this bigotry, this erasure, this flattening of people, the demonization, the smearing, it actually impacts all of us, right? At first, they went after the transgender community, and people said, who cares? Then they went after undocumented people, they said, who cares? Then they went after legal immigrants, and they said, who cares? Now they're going after Muslims, right? Now they're going after the bad Jews, right? And the bad Jews just happen to be the majority of young Jews, right? Which not only causes more divisions within Jewish American communities who have
Right.
legitimate fears of anti-Semitism, but also then is used to smear the rest of us who want justice and equality in Palestine.
Right. It is actually, in some ways, I think, a kind of Jewish version of, I think, what ISIS did, which, again, I'm not comparing,
Of
obviously,
fearing, yeah,
ISIS, but it's takfiri, right? I
yeah,
think it's my understanding, you know better than me, is they were basically saying all of these other people who think they're Muslim, they're not really Muslim,
yeah, yeah.
right? And that is essentially the same version. Natan Sharansky, the Israeli politician, former Soviet dissident, wrote this essay a few years ago in which he described many Jews as un-Jews. Basically, he said if you're not a supporter of Israel, basically you're an un-Jew, right? And that's the same move you make. And then, so conveniently, you just redefine all of these people whose political views you don't agree with as being outside the group.
And on the word unJew, I'm glad you mentioned it because I was going to bring it up about a year and a half ago during the October 7th initial the Hamas's terror attacks. But then Israel, of course, as always, disproportionately strikes. And then within 2 or 3 weeks, you had many Jews criticizing it. And an editorial came out saying, yeah, these are unJews now. And I'm like, I remember saying, there's only 60 million Jews. Probably not smart to takfir Jews simply for being critical against Israel and calling them unJews or capos, comparing them to like the
Right.
the Jews who collaborated with Nazi Germany. I'm like, nah, I know folks who care
Right.
deeply about Judaism and Israel. They're just deeply critical. They want Israel to do better.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and I think, I mean, one of the things that really I find fascinating and exciting to me is like, tell me about it, how it lands with you. But I would imagine if you're a young Muslim in the United States, or even not that young, you went through the backlash after September 11th, for a long period of time. Maybe things got a little better for a while. Now you're in the Trump era. I mean, 10 years into Trump, of all of the things that Trump has done. I imagine, and asking the question is like, is this country ever going to be welcoming of me, right? And see me as a fully American? And I would imagine, I don't know, that for those people who've been through so much, to see New York City vote for Zohran Mamdani must be really meaningful.
Very meaningful. Look, it's one of those things where I don't adulate politicians and never have and never will. Even with Barack Obama, he performed like I thought he would perform, a center-left politician, right?
Right,
I
right,
don't idolize these people, but it's also
right,
symbolic given the current circumstance where Donald Trump, a cruel vulgarian and a bigot who initially
right.
ran on the Muslim ban, right?
Yes,
Who
yes,
literally said that he saw a video that does not exist of Muslims celebrating after 9/11, who ran on the anti-Muslim and anti-black, birther conspiracy. Look,
yes,
just connect the dots, folks. The
yes,
fact that in New York, this country,
yes,
the city, which is the heartbeat of America, right, suffered from this devastating terrorist attack where 19 foreign hijackers brought down two towers about 24 years ago. That you fast forward, and a man named Zohran Mamdani, who has a Muslim identity, who's brown skinned, who has a beard, who's a son of immigrants from Africa, a Hindu mom, and also a Muslim dad, is able to, again, and this is what's so meaningful to me as an American, as a person who loves New York, is able to defeat a predator and a corrupt establishment man with the help and support of a Jewish man and a black man, right? He could
right,
not have done it without a multiracial, multi-religious coalition, right? That to me is the win. And the fact that the New York City said, you know what? We don't care that his name is Zoran Mamdani. You know what? The fact that he leans into his identity, uses these
right.
different languages, the fact that
Yes,
he had a ground game that reached out to all these communities, the fact that he
yes,
talked to all these different people, traditional
yes,
media, social media, the fact
yes,
that he was able to communicate, the fact that he
right,
was authentic, sincere, that he was
yes,
passionate, the fact that I might disagree with him, but you know
right,
what? At least he was honest. I agree with him
right,
on seven things, the three things I
right,
don't agree with, but
right,
you know what?
right, right.
He sounds sincere, he sounds honest, and at least he didn't buckle, right? The fact that that vision and that type of a message articulated from a brown man, that one, Peter, that's what means a lot to me. Because there's a lot of brown folks.
Right.
There's the Nikki Haley's and the Bobby Jindals and the Cash Patels.
Right.
That's not a win.
Right. I think actually I read, it's interesting to me that I think Kash Patel's family also were Gujaratis who were expelled from Uganda from Idi Amin. And to me, that was so important to remember, is that we sometimes fall into these traps thinking that because you have a particular background, a particular identity, religion, ethnicity, that necessarily you have the same values, right? These values are a choice about what you believe. And just like Jews don't share the same values necessarily, and we have profound internal conflicts, even though we have the same histories, but we interpret them differently. What I love about Mamdani is that he's interpreting his family's history in a way that leads him to care about, about the safety and dignity of everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
No, but
love the fact that, and I love the fact that he doesn't hide, that he doesn't have to be kind of, that the fact that he's that his, that he's South Asian, of South Asian descent, that his father's Muslim, he is not hiding that, right? Like, because I don't want to have to hide that in my life, right? As a Jew in New York, in public life, I want to be able to bring all of myself into the public sphere. So I'm happy that he can bring this into the public sphere too. He can go to pray on Fridays at the mosque as the mayor and have cameras there. Like, that's beautiful to me. That's what I want for everybody in the city.
and that's the message and the story that he's willing to sell, and it's also the message and story that Barack Obama sold, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I'm the son of two different worlds,
Yes,
biracial, white mom, Kenyan
right.
Muslim father, born in Hawaii, raised in Indonesia and America, and you too can be president like me because
Yeah,
America contains multitudes.
yes,
And that was the story of plentitude and Donald Trump and supremacy, whether it's white supremacy, Jewish supremacy, Muslim supremacy, South African supremacy. It's all about scarcity,
yes,
right? us versus them. They're taking my land. They're taking my resources, right? You make me uncomfortable, so I have to crush you. There can only be one hero, me. And anyone who looks like me and anyone who doesn't look like me, they're either the villain or they better be the sidekick and they better be quiet. And with
Right.
Mamdani and actually what Obama did is it's expansive. And
Yes.
they dare I say were woke. And they
Right.
leaned into the wokeness, but they leaned into the wokeness by also talking to the people and giving them solutions for their needs, right? Like, yeah,
Absolutely.
housing is freaking unaffordable, man. Like,
Yes.
why are the rich not paying their taxes? And why
Right.
does everyone go for the landlords and not the tenants, right? And yeah, why can't bus be made affordable? And people are like,
Right.
oh, and he seems passionate and authentic,
Right.
and he's not leaving the little guy behind, whether it's
Yeah.
Palestinian or Ukrainian or the Jewish man who literally feels fear due to anti-Semitism, which is real, right? He's bringing us all in. Everyone has the right to dignity. That's what I think is the win, and the fact that he's able not to, going back full circle, do the corporate manufactured talking point on Israel and undocumented
Right.
immigrants, right? He
Right.
just leads
Right.
with conviction or what seems like conviction, Pete.
Yes, right. And it's also just, it's a beautiful to me, fuck you to Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and these people who think they're going to take America back to the 1950s and the 1980s. Somehow they're going to erase all of these black and brown people who came to the United States in recent decades, or they're going to restore all these hierarchies. I mean, they're doing a huge amount of damage, obviously. But like to me, the election of Zohran Mamdani says, sorry, like this is America in 2015, 2025. And it's and there's nothing you can do about it, right? And to me that was that given how shitty a year this has been,
Yeah.
to me that was really
Can I
meaningful.
get this final question? And you mentioned this in a tweet, and I think it's important, right? The fears and concerns of Jews, just like many Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians, is valid.
Right.
Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-Arab violence. And the reason why I call it Islamophobia is it includes not just Muslims, but also those who look Muslimi. The first hate
Absolutely.
crime after
Right.
9/11 was against Balbir Singh, right? It doesn't
Yes.
matter if you're an Arab
Was he
Christian. It
right.
doesn't matter if you're secular, right? They come after all of us. So that's what I mean. But anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, encompassing all those communities, has spiked in the past year and a
Yes.
half, like many of
Yes.
us predicted would, because the
Yes.
worst extremists on all sides, especially white supremacists, have done a divide and conquer around the Israel-Palestine conflict. If you don't believe me, look at the tweets of Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens and a few others,
Yes.
right? So there is legitimate fear and there is violence against Jewish communities. And so, what would you say to those Jews who are still on the fence, who are like, okay, I'm cautious. I have a couple of toes in the Mamdani pool.
Right. Right.
But I see the violence against this Jewish community who are protesting for the hostages, and I saw the couple that was killed,
Right.
and I don't think the liberals or anyone else is taking our concerns seriously. How would you convince them to jump in?
I mean, look, people can disagree with Zohran Mamdani and anything. They might disagree with some of his economic policies. I mean, these are all legitimate debates. They can disagree with his views on Israel, even if they want to. But I think the bet that American Jews have historically made in the United States is that we are safer as America moves closer towards the promise of treating everybody equally. And the more America becomes a country based on equality under the law, and the more we can fight against and move away from our history, our deep history of structural racism, that Jews benefit from that. Jews benefited so massively from the civil rights movement. When black people put themselves on the line, it was at that time that the quotas on Jews at universities and white Jew law firms, that's when they disappeared because it changed America. So the struggle against Islamophobia and anti-black racism, that is also what keeps us safe, right? It's these, just as you were saying, it's these alliances. To think you're going to be safe because you make some kind of separate peace with the Donald Trumps and the white nationalist racists of the world because at this particular moment they like Israel or whatever, that has never been a good strategy for Jewish safety. The people are our best allies for safety are the people who also understand what it's like to be discriminated against. We protect them, they protect us, and all of us together are strong enough, I think, to ultimately overcome these really dangerous forces in the society.
And the people who say they care about anti-Semitism are the people who are promoting anti-Semitism. If you don't believe me, I give you Donald Trump and Elise Stefanik, folks.
Absolutely.
They're using all of us, they're pitting us against each other. And
Right.
I think, finally, what was so beautiful, again, bringing it back full circle, is that New York said, nah, we see through the bullshit.
Right.
Now we're
Absolutely.
not going to play your game. Now we're
Right.
not going to be allowed to be divided around religious and cultural lines. Nah, that narrative of Muslims and Jews always hate each other,
Right.
nonsense. And
Right.
and you saw this cross section of the Avengers coming together to defeat a predator. I mean, like you said, It's such a beautiful American story,
Yeah,
and it's so New York. Uh,
absolutely.
Peter, how can people support you? Please shamelessly promote yourself.
I'll do my best. So I like you have a newsletter on Substack. It's the Beinart Notebook, and then I have this recent book, Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza. People can check out Jewish Currents as well, the publication that I work for. They can check out the CUNY Journalism School, which is a fabulous place where I teach. So that's my shameless promotion.
And this has been the second time I've tried to do this as a Substack Live with Peter, who's a Shonda to Israeli Jews who are awesome at tech. So the third time, inshallah, we will make this happen. We will figure out, we will have Peter, who's otherwise a brilliant man, figure out what my 5-year-old can figure out when it comes to iPhones. And the third time we do this, this will be a Substack Live, inshallah.
Inshallah, Zrat Hashem.
Thank you, Peter.